Outside the box with Jeff Conine. It has been a little while. We've both been traveling all over. We've both been busy. But Jeff, thank you for taking the time. 2 days until your college baseball career as a coach starts. How amped are you, Jeff?
Well, first of all, great to be here. It's been too long, but yeah, it's beyond excited. You know, we start with our fall season in early September, and we go through pretty close to the end of November, playing and working out and getting these kids ready for the college baseball season. Then you have to take 2 months off. So you start back up again early January, right when the kids get back to school. January 10th, we started again. And, you know, with the NCAA rules about how much time you're allotted each week to work with everyone, starts off at 8 hours per week when you first come back for about 3 weeks. And then it goes to 20 hours per week. So now we can start having scrimmages and against each other. And, you know, luckily there's a big enough roster in college baseball to make two teams. So we've got basically the guys are playing against each other for almost 3 weeks now. And I'm tired of it. I'm tired of seeing our guys play against each other. I'm really ready for college baseball season to start and see what our guys are capable of.
And what's been, the most just, I guess, you go into a job, you have things you expect, you have things that you didn't expect on the good side, the bad side. And usually it's the good side when you get to do something like coaching college baseball. What's been the most pleasant surprise of being able to coach at Florida International University so far? I mean, the games haven't started yet, but you've worked a lot. I mean, I'd argue that, the most tumultuous times has got to be preparing for the season, because that's the most stressful point is, making sure the guys are ready to go. What's been the biggest surprise and most pleasant surprise of the gig so far?
I think probably the most pleasant surprise is how much I love it.
That's a great answer. Now.
I didn't know what to expect going in. I didn't know if this would be for me. They said, "Hey, let's do it for a year and see if you enjoy it and see if you like it." And it's been fantastic. I love teaching the game of baseball, and these guys are all trying to expand their knowledge each day. They're receptive. They ask questions. They, put forth a tremendous amount of effort. And what more can you ask as a teacher and a coach than that? So it's been fantastic.
Yeah, it's really funny. It's one of those things where when the players have that hunger for knowledge, it gives you more hunger, right? To want to provide that knowledge, right? Like it gives you almost more energy, right? To keep going when they're asking you questions, and you could see the inquisitiveness, right? I mean, these are guys, I feel like FIU does a really good job of recruiting from home. And a lot of, you guys go all over, but a lot of the South Florida, just baseball, Miami through and through guys, you feel like your roster is made up of a lot of those just baseball junkie South Florida types that have just played almost every minute of their whole lives.
Yeah, definitely. 90% of our roster is probably from Florida, and majority of that is South Florida. And these kids are grown up in this baseball system, this crazy baseball travel system that we have here. And we're lucky we could do it all year long in Florida. And these kids have played hundreds of games before they even get in high school. When I was growing up out in California, we had the Little League season. That was it. I played 21 or 22 games. That was it. Go on to the next sport and wait till next year. And now it's a constant barrage of baseball. And, it shows these kids are way better than anything that we came up with out of California. As a whole, now it's just baseball's life down here. So, like you said, it's fun to have these kids have played against each other a lot growing up. They played a travel ball together and against each other in high school together and against each other. So they're all very well versed in each other's games, and we're ready to put it together.
You guys don't waste any time. You guys have some pretty big games out of the gate. Michigan coming down, to play you guys for a 3-game set. Miami not too far after for a quick 1-game spot. It's going to be a pretty good gauge there. And how excited are you for that first series, just the first college series where you're in the dugout and you've never been in the dugout as anything other than a player, right? Maybe when you were with the Marlins on the side of pregame as an advisor and then in the front office, but you never been in the dugout for a game as anything but a player, right?
Well, spring training, I would suit up
Yeah.
and I'd be in the dugout for games, but those didn't count. Obviously this, I keep telling the kids, this is when the bell rings, this is when things get real and everything starts counting. You start writing everything down. The stats count and the ERAs count and the wins count. So, for real games, this is the first time I've ever done this. So I'm super excited. We got University or St. Thomas University from Minnesota is going to be our first games. I'm sure they're ready to get out of the frozen tundra up there and come down to sunny South Florida. It's supposed to be nice this weekend in the 80s, and it'll be a good test. I mean, it's a Division III school just going to Division I this year, but last year they had a heck of a season. I think they were like 38-17 or something. They got some pretty good pitching coming at us. We got a fifth-year grad student, I think, starting on Friday, a lefty that had about 83 innings pitched and struck out 114 batters. So
wow.
I don't care what level you're at. That's pretty good.
Yeah, I was going to say that is good at any level. And then from there, you get a sneaky good program in Bethune-Cookman that, again, any Florida school, I always say it, any Florida college that you play is good. Like, they're going to have dudes. Bethune-Cookman, I mean, you guys are going to have FAU, which I think will be a really fun matchup as well. I believe that's a home and home, right? 1-1, where you have one up there and one down by you guys.
Yeah, I think so. It's like the crosstown rivalry, so to speak. And the only other team, and I think in our conference, it's even in Florida. Our conference is spread out all over the United States. I know we go to San Antonio this year. We go to Louisiana Tech. We go to Western Kentucky, and we go to Birmingham, UAB. So it's pretty spread out.
I'm excited for FAU selfishly, because that's about a 6-minute drive from me. Whereas might be a little bit further to get down there. I'm going to make the trip, absolutely, but a little bit further traffic pending to get down to FIU's incredible facility down there. But really excited to check out the team. A lot of good players this year and a lot to watch for, and a pretty fun schedule. So we will definitely be keeping tabs there. And I'm excited to talk to you after that first series, which by the time this episode's out will be tomorrow. So keep tabs on FIU as they continue to get ready for the season and get going here. We're hoping that baseball players at the highest level will be able to start getting ready for the season. And, I know you've been busy being a coach and getting your team ready, but on the professional side and on the major league side, it's been incredibly frustrating, Jeff. It has been really, really frustrating to see the way the negotiations have gone or not gone so far. And, it's not totally surprising. We knew this was on the horizon. We've talked about this a lot in the past, but, what's really interesting to me, and I wanted to kind of talk about it with you versus some of the differences from 94, which you lived firsthand, whereas you're more on the outside of this one, and just explaining some of the things that I saw that really stood out to me. And I'm curious if any of this is stuff that you noticed in 94. It's a different world in terms of media and ways that you can leak things and how you can use PR to your advantage. And I think we're seeing a Rob Manfred-led side on MLB do a really good job or bad job, depending how you look at it, of using the media, using PR. And there's just been a lot more public comments. This whole dispute has been a lot more public, which I think makes it look a lot worse. In 94, it was bad enough to halt the season, right? And I mean, that has to be bad. And it was bad for baseball, but it wasn't as visible publicly because you didn't have all of these ways of dissemination of quotes and information and leaks and this and that. How ugly was it, just by the fact of me not being alive in 94? How ugly was it optically? It was ugly enough for, the fandom to take a big hit. Attendance was down once baseball came back. Viewership was down. But how ugly was it through the process in terms of, what the public was able to know about what the dispute was? And honestly, what were the big talking points there that halted the season?
Well, like you said, there was no Twitter, there was no Facebook, there was no Instagram to keep everyone up to date minute by minute. They basically had to read the newspaper or watch the news or watch ESPN to kind of keep up with what negotiations were going or how they were going at that point. I think the main sticking point back then is that the owners wanted a hard salary cap. And, it's been so long. It's hard for me to remember exactly what the huge sticking points were, but I know that was one of the major ones, was a hard salary cap. And, the CBA was expiring after the season was over. And we felt as a players association that to get their attention and to get to the negotiating table and to get a deal done, we needed to walk out. And that's exactly what we did. August 12th, 1994, we didn't go to the ballpark. And as we know, and everyone knows, the rest of that season was canceled, which, first time in Major League Baseball history, there wasn't a World Series, I think, outside of World War II. So it was very damaging because, it goes both ways. I think the general public sees, baseball players as rich athletes that have nothing to complain about. They make a lot of money. And why on earth would you walk away from a season when you make so much money and everything seems hunky-dory? And, without the social media nowadays, we had to wait until the papers come out and try to explain our side of the story. And
it's a great point.
And, kind of gauge how negotiations are going and tell everyone that it's not just about money. It's about, playing conditions and the owners taking advantage of their situation. So, that I think was the main thing that, especially, my wife would go out and the fans were mad. They're like, they thought it was just about money and that's all it was. And you guys make so much money and that takes care of all problems if you just have a lot of money. And, the average fan didn't really know why we went on strike. And that was tough to explain to a lot of people.
I love that you brought this up. And that's why I just knew having the conversation in itself, we'd be able to find a lot of just differences between the two. And that's got to be one of the biggest differences, right? What I've noticed that is so unanimous, or nothing's unanimous in this world, but very close to unanimous, has been the support for the players. I mean, I have the occasional, profile pictureless Twitter account that yells at me saying the players are greedy, but the vast 99% of people are understanding that the players are just trying to have fair representation here. They're just trying to have some sort of semblance of just being compensated at, what is fair to what the revenue has reflected through the years. It's only fair, right? We're seeing more disparity in what the owners are bringing in versus what the players are getting. And we're also seeing the shelf life of players shorter, and it's taking longer for them to get paid. I think it's very obvious what those issues are. But it seemed like in 94, you had that issue of the players were the ones that, quote unquote, decided to end the season technically. Whereas in this instance, the owners locked out the players, and that's it. The players are like, hey, we want to go, but they've got to be fair here. We're not just going to agree to any deal. That's a big difference here. And do you think that if there is a delay to the season, the fact that the players have a lot more support than usual would maybe lessen the impact that you saw? Because something you've talked about, one of the big themes on this podcast has been how much of a hit 94 took to or how much it was just of an impact to baseball as a whole, and as a product and as a company. Do you think that it wouldn't be necessarily as catastrophic, since people won't have that anger towards the players and owners alike? It's more of just an owner's frustration.
I think it'll be less, yes, because back in 94, we are the ones that walked away. So the fans were mad. I don't think people realize that we drew over 3 million fans here in South Florida the first year. We were on pace to draw over 3 million again in the second year, or right around 3 million. And those are huge numbers. Not many teams do that nowadays. And the fan base here just turned away. They said, all right, we got something else to watch. We're going to go watch it. And when we came back, the fans weren't there anymore. So that happened pretty much across the country. It was until that 98 season when Sosa and McGuire made that ridiculous, home run barrage that ended up in setting new records. I think that's, they say it's been in documentary even that's the season the fans came back. McGuire and Sosa brought them back, and after that, attendance numbers went back up, and baseball was in vogue again. So there's a lot to consider. When you don't play and there's no revenue coming in, it hurts both sides. So I think what's going on now with negotiations is negotiations. You know, they start low, we start high, and that's where they go, and they walk away, and it's posturing. It's like when you go to a used car lot or a new car lot, whatever, and you say, I want to pay this for this car. And the guy says, sorry, I can't do that. And you walk away. And he's like, whoa, wait a second. Come on back. Let's talk about this now. Because when you show that you're serious about what you want, then that's what spurs negotiations and eventually a deal.
It's a great point too, because, you know, every single time we have a meeting, it's been better now, but out of the gate, it was like, oh, the meeting between the players and the owners only lasted 10 minutes. And everyone's like, it's hysterical. Like, people are hysterical on Twitter. Like, oh, it's over. No season. We're screwed. I'm like, no, it's just, this is how it's always been. You just didn't know it, because now you have guys, and I know you'll love this, Jeff, that you have guys, I forget who it was. Trevor May, I believe it was talking about the negotiations and his frustrations with it on his Twitch stream as he played video games. So he's playing video games and he's complaining about Rob Manfred. You know, when you're talking about how you guys had to wait until you could be heard through, you know, the newspaper and an interview or whatever it may be. And these guys can go just fire up their computer, fire up the Xbox, turn on a camera and vent, and people will listen, and it'll be on every single publication. It got picked up by everything. All right. Because the player's speaking out and being pretty, taking a pretty big stance there. I know you're a we guy. You're not a me guy, but 94, you were hitting 319, 373, 525, which is just an insane slash line. You had 18 home runs through 115 games. And how difficult was it for you to be like, yeah, let's bang this season. No, thanks. Let's end this thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's rough. It's rough. And I think especially when you're having a great season, you don't want it to end. But our leadership was very, very good at explaining why we needed to walk out, and eventually pretty much everybody was on board. You know, there's a few dissenting votes here or there, but majority of guys were like, yeah, we need to do this. We want to stand up for what the groundwork that has been laid for us in the past by other guys that have gone on strike and fought for what we had at that point. And you know, we had big meetings. We had East Coast meetings and West Coast meetings. And I went to Tampa, and there's 300 and some players in a ballroom in Tampa, at a hotel in Tampa. They kept us up to date, and they, you know, we were well informed on what the issues were. And, you know, we couldn't just, like you said, open up a computer and talk about or see what was going on. We had to meet in person, or if we had questions, we had to pick up the phone call with the cord on it and the dial thing and call the Player Association and find out what was going on. So aside from that, we knew what was printed in the newspaper or we saw on ESPN, and it was a slow process because of that. And I think, you know, nowadays it should be accelerate more quickly just because of that, because there's so much information out there and everybody knows where everyone stands, and let's just get it moving.
I agree totally. And the last question, kind of on the lockout side, but as it pertains to you, one of the big topics is, you know, what, as I mentioned earlier, how long it takes players to get paid, you know, and of course they're getting paid, but they want to raise the minimum salary, and the years of control is something that's really frustrating for players, because if the shelf life is shorter for the average baseball player, and it's taking as long as ever for players to get control, or to expire that control, right? To play out those years where teams have either arbitration or minor league or minor salary control. Service time manipulation is a big topic of it. And that wasn't necessarily something with you, but if you come up at age 26, 27, with the years of control that teams now have over you, you're not going to get that new contract or that ability to hit free agency until you're 32, 33. How is that for you as somebody that, you were a little bit later coming up through the minor leagues, because when you were drafted, you had 0 at-bats under your belt. You were able to hit and make up for lost time about as efficiently and effectively as anybody could. But by the time you really made your full debut and played a full 162, you were 27 years old. And fortunately, you played 17 years because you hit until you were 41. But I mean, how long was it until you were able to hit the open market and go get your free agent contract?
Yeah, I mean, that's a big point of contention, because nowadays, you know, 32, 33 is an aging baseball player. And if you don't have a productive season, you know, they'll find somebody else. So it's a good point. The first 3 years are total control by the team, and they are under no obligation to give you a raise. I've known of teams that would give you the minimum salary for basically, and maybe just a minor bump in salary those first 3 years. Doesn't matter what kind of year you had. Back in the day when I was first coming up, the minimum salary was 109. And, the next year they might give you a raise to 120. And then the year after that, they might go 140, but they were under no obligation to give you any more than that until you reached arbitration. So like you said, I came up at 27 years old, and now that's old for someone that's making their debut in the big leagues. I got called up at 24, but didn't stick until 27. That was my full-time gig. And, that's late. And I was fortunate enough to be productive through my 30s and be wanted by teams still, and was able to get contracts. But I think majority of players around 33, 34, they're getting forced out of the game.
When did you feel like you were maybe slowing down a tad, or at least things that came easy to you physically started to become a little bit more of a thought? At what point did you feel like you weren't the 27-year-old invincible athlete? I always am curious. I know it's different for every player, but at what point did you start to feel that a little bit?
For me, it was later. In 2003, what was I, 37 or 38? I had a pretty good season there combined with Baltimore. I felt good the next year too. And I unfortunately had a shoulder injury that kind of really set me back in 2005. Had limited at bats, and then, I signed a free agent contract with Baltimore, and they had a performance clause in there that, if I hit a number of at bats, it automatically kicked in for 2007. So it actually worked out perfect for me because I knew I was getting up there. And I think those were the years where I really felt like, my skills were slowing down. I'd become more of a platoon type player, more off the bench. And it was a perfect thing to say, you know what, if my incentive kicks in, that'll be my last year. And if it doesn't, this will be my last year. So 2006 was it for me. And I knew it. I was so fortunate that I got to call my own shot and walk away from the game under my own terms, which a lot of guys, I would say majority of guys, don't get to do. They just try to hang on and try to get new contracts, which of course you'd want to as long as you can. But I was fortunate enough to walk away and know that I did everything I could for this game.
Totally. And that's the thing that I think players are fighting for, because you're in the 1% or less, right? That are able to do that. And they're trying to fight for, a lot of the guys that aren't fortunate enough to be able to maneuver that way and get through their career and call the shots at the end there. Back to 94. About just the season itself. One of my favorite things to just talk about is like, what if we finished that year? What if we were able to see how the rest of it went? You would have had an insane season, as you already did, but a division rival at the time might have won the World Series. And I'm curious if you think they could have pulled it off. And, if you could run a simulation, who would you put your bet on, I guess, so to speak? Would it be the Expos, or would it be another team? Because that Expos team was 74-40. They had players from a young 21-year-old Cliff Floyd to Moises Alou to Hall of Famer Larry Walker, Marquise Grissom. This was a really good team. Pedro Martinez on the pitching side. This was unbelievably talented. And then they had the man himself, Felipe Alou, at the helm, who was the guy that promised to get you in the All-Star game, got you that pinch hit spot, and you did the rest. Do you think that team would have pulled it off if they were able to finish the season?
Yeah, they were the best team in baseball that year. I think heading above anybody else. They just had the best outfield I think I'd ever played against.
Really?
Lou, Grissom, and Walker out there. Grissom was one of those frustrating center fielders that played very shallow and could go back on a ball with the best of them. And if it had any air underneath it, he was catching it. And you had the corner guys, Alou and Walker. Walker might have been one of the best athletes I've ever seen play the game of baseball. He could do it all: run, throw, hit, had a cannon for an arm, had great speed, is a big dude, had power. He was, that prototypical 5-tool guy that manned ridiculous right field. So outfield, probably one of the best I've ever seen. Their pitching staff was so solid with Pedro. I think Ken Hill was on that staff.
Yep.
Who was the lefty?
They had Jeff Fassero.
Jeff Fassero was
Butch Henry.
Solid. They had who was their closer? The closer was was Wetland their closer that year?
John Wetland. I'm not even familiar with John Wetland, but he had a 2.83 ERA in 63 2/3. They went closer by committee. Mel Rojas. I know Mel Rojas.
Yeah.
Mel Rojas was great too.
Yeah, it's one of those seasons where everything gels and everything. They had all the right personnel to make it happen, and we did it twice in Florida, and they're two totally different teams, but when you got it, in the clubhouse when you got it, and they had it that year.
So baseball is so weird. How do you return in 95 and go 66 and 78 with most of the same team, right? Like they lose Larry Walker. Like, I guess that shows how much of an impact Larry Walker was, because you lose Larry Walker. They lost a couple other guys, but I mean, this is still a lot of the same dudes. I believe they lost Wetland as well. Is that just because of the layoff, all those things, you almost feel like you're starting over again? Or is that kind of a testament to the impact of how good Larry Walker was? Because I mean, I know Larry Walker was phenomenal, but to hear you say those things about him and across the board and how much he impacted the game, I always thought he was a Hall of Famer. I thought it was ridiculous that we even had conversations about whether or not he was, but I mean, he's that like MVP change your team type of guy, huh?
Well, that, and, in the clubhouse, which, you and I have talked about a lot, is what clubhouse chemistry will do to a team. He was that leader in the clubhouse that would command a presence and was able to, from what I've heard anyway, I wasn't in a clubhouse with him, but those guys that take control, and if you're not playing the game the right way, they step in and say, no, this is the way you do it. And everybody respected him. He was, that guy in the clubhouse that was the glue and so important. And that shows it right there. They had a great team that next year, like you said, with a very similar personnel, but couldn't get it done.
And where does that team rank versus some of the other teams that you ran into through your years in baseball? I always think of the 2003 Yankees, right? I mean, that's always going to be one. Some of those Braves teams. Is there another team that was just loaded that maybe we don't talk about enough?
You talk about the Yankees, obviously, and I've said it before, the 96 to the 01 Yankees were probably the greatest teams I ever played against. Not only because they had an all-star at every position, basically, but they played the game the right way. Joe Torre had that group on the same page as far as conduct on how to be a Major League Baseball player and how to play the game the right way. And they did it, man. It was very impressive, those teams. I hated going there because I knew that we're probably going to get our butts kicked. But as a fan and as a competitor, it was fun competing against those guys. And, the St. Louis teams were always good and competitive. I don't think people realize they've only had like one losing season in the last 40 years or something crazy. Their record of putting together winning teams above 500 is just remarkable. But they do it every single year. And then, you look at some of the lower budget teams that are always there. The A's, even back then, were talented and would put together some great teams with that pitching staff they had with Mulder, Zito, and Hudson, with Miguel Tejada at short and Eric Chavez at third. And I mean, they had some really juggernaut teams that never really got the recognition they did because they never won the World Series, but they were there every year.
Yeah, it's crazy. I don't think people realize how darn good. I don't realize, at least sometimes, how darn consistent the Cardinals were. I love talking about just what other organizations stand out to you when you're a player that would be like, hey, it would be nice to play there. I think you mentioned St. Louis in the past. What's another team that it would be like, okay, if it ever came up to it, I wouldn't mind playing in that environment and playing for that organization?
I mean, you got all the, us as entertainers, we're baseball we're entertainers, and you look at the great fan bases across America and the great teams that I think you'd like to play in front of. So Boston and New York always were at the top of the list. Like, hey, if I had an opportunity to be a Yankee or Red Sox for a year, that would be pretty special. Chicago Cubs. I mean, those fans adore the Cubs, where right across town, the White Sox, not so much. You want to be in a Cubs uniform. And you go out to the West Coast, and the Giants have always had amazing fans. And, I love the Bay Area. And the Dodgers, to be a Dodger would be cool. The place draws 3 million every single year for the last 50 years. It's crazy how amazing their fan base is. Even though they show up in the third and leave in the seventh, they still show up. But those are the teams, I think, that St. Louis, another one that, just one of the best fan bases in baseball. And you just love that when you went there, the fans would root against you, but they are also appreciative of a good play, and they'd give you a hand for making a diving catch or something like that, because they love the game.
That's one of my favorite things. When you tell me that, I'm like, that's what it's all about. Whenever I see a player just absolutely rob, when I was going to Marlins games as a fan, I'd always look at my dad and we'd be like, man, that was pretty cool. Like you got to give credit where credit's due. And you love a good fan base that does that. I want to quiz you, because you're so good with the recall on 90 to 99, that decade, some of the best performers, and see if you can guess it, because this was a trivia question. And the second I didn't get it right. I'll tell you, you could have given me 500 guesses. I wouldn't have got it right. And the second that I found out the answer, I was like, I got to ask Jeff this. I got to see if Jeff knows this. So for the decade of 90 to 99.
I'm bad at this stuff. Other than my own team or my own stuff, I mean, I'm not good. So I'll give it a shot, but we'll see. Some clues probably.
I'm telling you, I don't think anybody would get this one. I was floored by this, but who had the most hits in the 90 to 99 decade in Major League Baseball?
So obviously it's not an obvious one, because you wouldn't have said that if it's. I
like this role reversal. It's almost like the jerseys. Now you know what it feels like. Who had the most hits? A great player, though, nonetheless. And somebody I'm sure you crossed paths with plenty, but I was still just like, that would never have been a guy that I would have guessed. I'll see if I can give you a couple hints.
American League or National League?
National League.
National League, most hits in the decade of the 90s.
Career went from 88 to 2003.
Wow. All right. Hall of Famer or no?
3-time All-Star, not a Hall of Famer. And he's from I don't know California that well, but he's from California.
From Cali. Oh, geez, I'm terrible at this game.
Won the World Series in 2001.
Okay, narrows it down. Mark Grace?
Yep. You got it. How that was impressive. See, you sold yourself short on that one. But how crazy is that? Mark Grace.
Mark Grace could rake. He could flat out hit. That guy was special, man. He was a good hitter.
Yeah, it's not a slight to Mark Grace, but that's kind of like a stump you answer, right?
Yeah. He wasn't that huge power guy. He didn't drive in a boatload of runs or hit a ton of home runs, but God, he was so consistent with the bat. One of the best at hitting the ball where it was pitched, opposite field, up the middle, used all fields all the time. A great defender at first base.
Yep, 4 Gold Gloves.
And one of those guys, you get down to first base and just was cool and liked to talk to you and have a good time on the field. So one of my favorite players to play against was Mark Grace.
Really? So that makes it even better. I'm glad I got you with that. I asked you that trivia question. Not surprised you got it. 303 career hitter. I mean, with 45 career hits. I mean,
good. Yeah.
Crazy. And
sneaky good career. You're right.
Sneaky good career. Some of these guys, they deserve a little bit of praise. And that's the thing, Jeff. I was talking about it and I forget who it was, but somebody was asking me, what's it been like hosting the podcast? So Jeff, you must learn a lot more about the 90s. Cause I've always been a history guy when it comes to baseball, but I mean, there's no way I can know all these things. And I said, one of the things that stands out to me the most is how many guys had great careers in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s that we overlook or that just almost don't get talked about enough. Albert Bell being the one that you really clued me into about his peak. I mean, his peak is as good as, and I'd take his peak over anybody or up there with anybody in the modern era. And I think it's just cool really looking at a lot of these 2000s and 90s guys that could really hit, that get overlooked a little bit by the power surge that we saw across the game. But you would have hit the 2000 hit threshold if 94 wasn't cut short either. And that's another one too. How much did those milestones, you're kind of a numbers guy, right? I mean, like, you remember numbers really well. How much did those numbers matter to you through the years? I mean, like, at the end of the day, winning's the most important, but it's cool. I mean, I would care. I'll be honest. Like, not publicly or celebrating or throwing myself a party, but internally, I'm like, wow, that's 2000. Like, that's cool. Or, oh, that's 1500. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, you don't I didn't really pay attention to numbers until later on. When you start hitting a couple milestones, I remember walking up to the plate in Cincinnati, and they flashed on the big board that I was playing my 2000th game, and I had no idea. I had no idea that I had played 2000 games, and I looked up there and I'm like, wow, damn, that's a lot of games. Stuff like that. Obviously, the big milestones. You know how many hits you got basically after, if you're going towards 2000 or some big milestone like that. It's everywhere. It's in the game notes, and people talk about, they interview you about it. So you try not to focus on those. You try not to focus on results. I always try to focus on day-to-day goals of getting myself prepared and playing a game. And then, the numbers, you play long enough, they're going to pile up.
And that's what it is it's a battle of longevity, which is so difficult. A few more quick questions before we flip the script, and I'll guess the jersey. Most Ks from 90 to 99. More obvious guy, but there's a lot of really good players from 90 to 99. Most Ks.
You mean pitching wise?
Yes.
90 to 99 pitching Ks would probably be Randy Johnson.
Boom. Got it. 2,538.
Wow. Average 250 a year. That's insane.
How uncomfortable was he?
He was, I faced him my first time I ever faced him. I had gotten called up in 1990, that 24-year-old rookie. We go to Seattle, the Kingdome, and, George Brett has Randy Johnson-itis that day. So, hey, Rook, you're playing first base, and I got to face Randy Johnson back in the day when he wasn't a pitcher. He was a thrower, and he was throwing 100 and didn't really know where it was going. And that was a very, very uncomfortable at bat. I'd never seen anything like that, and at 6'10", he's almost shaking hands with you when he releases the ball. It's so close, and just an odd arm angle, and the slider was just wipe out, crazy slider. And that was very uncomfortable at bat, but ended up hitting a home run off him here in South Florida when he's with the Diamondbacks later on in his career. But still one of the best pitchers in the history of the game.
He didn't John Kruk you, right? With like a fastball way over your head. That's one of my favorite clips ever. You see Kruk just like,
turn their helmet around backwards. John Kruk was one of the greatest, funniest guys in our game, maybe in the history. He was awesome.
That's a guy I would, on top of a list of just like, wouldn't it be great to talk to him? I mean, he's just an unbelievably funny dude when you look at those clips through the years. And
one of my favorite stories is a John Kruk story. We're playing the Phillies. He gets to first base, and it's 1,000,000 degrees, and he is sweating profusely like you wouldn't believe. He walks down to first base, and he looks at me and he goes, "How the F do you guys play down here, man? This is unbelievable, guys. I can't wait to get back in the clubhouse and have a beer." And so he leads off. He takes his lead off, and I think Benito Santiago is behind the plate. And it was early in the game, so I don't know if it had rained or the ground was a little slick. So Benito back picks after a pitch, and he belly flops and barely gets back to the bag because he slipped a little bit. And he stands up, he goes, "What the fuck is going on here? Are you kidding me? I'm not going anywhere." And he's like yelling at Benito Santiago during the game. He's like, "Come on, man, what the fuck's going on here?" So then he stands there and they give signs, and he's like, they put on a hit and run. So I don't know if they're just doing this to mess with John Kruk, but he takes off, right? And it's a foul ball. So he comes back to the bag, and he's huffing and puffing. He's sweating like crazy. He goes, "Screw this. I ain't going nowhere. I'm not looking for signs. I ain't looking for nothing." And he literally got like a 2-foot lead. And I'm like, a rookie. And here's John Kruk. Just this dialogue that I'm hearing from him is cracking me up. and he got like a 2-foot lead. He goes, I am staying put. I ain't getting picked off. I ain't stealing nothing. So the next pitch or two was a ground ball to second base, and he didn't even make it halfway. He just peeled off and ran to the dugout, and he might have had a beer in between innings. I don't know, but he was a funny guy.
That's unbelievable. That's a great story. I know that feeling of the. I mean, you're probably seeing it now. I mean, the weather's good down in Florida right now, but you're going to have some players that are feeling it. But in college, you better keep going. If they put the hit and run on 5 times, you better be ready to go.
Oh, absolutely.
You got to go a long way to get to territory where John Kruk, you can get away with the stuff that John Kruk was getting away with. You got to be a big league all-star.
Yeah, if you're hitting 300 plus, you can get away with stuff like that.
Last one. Speaking of all-stars, I'm going to give you 3 of the 4 guys that were 10-time all-stars through that decade. So they were all-star every single year of it. Cal Ripken Jr., Tony Gwynn, Ken Griffey Jr., and one other player. Do you know who the one other player is that was a 10-time all-star through that duration?
Griffey, Gwynn, Ripken, dang. Is it a Yankee?
He was never a Yankee, no.
Ozzie Smith.
Good guess, but no.
Omar Vizquel.
Roberto Alomar.
Oh, Roberto Alomar. Wow, good one.
He had a nice little stretch there. From literally, he was never an all-star again after 2001. It was 1990 to 2001. None on either side of it after that. But I thought that was a crazy one just because 4 guys, all-stars every single year through that decade.
That's
Team
crazy.
with the most wins, Braves 925, unsurprising there. And you saw firsthand how good that team was. Flipping the script now, you've got, I'm assuming, an Orioles jersey on.
You are correct, sir. What gave it away?
It can't be Ripken, right? I mean, like that no, one we already did.
We already did Ripken, yep.
Can you give me
Lots to choose from. I've got a number of Orioles jerseys in my collection.
I know Orioles. Whenever you break out the O's, it's going to be tough for me because you were there in different spots. What years? Like what year range?
Hall of Famer.
Hall of Fame Oriole. Hall of Fame Oriole.
Probably 70s was his biggest decade.
I might be a little bit. He was probably before this. Brooks Robinson.
No, good guess though.
He was 60s, right?
He was 60s and 70s.
Unbelievable glove. I was watching some of his old video. Oh my gosh.
Insane. I think 19 gold gloves or 8, 7?
Yeah. No, it'll never be topped, I don't think, by a third baseman. Maybe Arenado's the only guy that has a shot.
He ain't gonna play 19 years.
Yeah, there's no way. No one can do it anymore like that. Damn, that was my ace. That was ace in the hole. That was my best guess. I don't know who I would guess if it's not Brooks Robinson. Pitcher?
Yeah.
Oh, geez. I might have to throw in the towel on an Orioles pitcher.
Wow, really? Come on, Aram.
Orioles pitcher. I'm going to be upset with myself, aren't I?
Yeah, probably.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Jim Palmer. Yeah, I'm going to be upset with myself for a while for that one. Damn. Good. Palmer. Okay, that's a cool one. And that is a sweet jersey.
Yeah.
What's the story on Palmer?
Well, he was one of our, TV guys. He did announcing for the Orioles. So I got to see him pretty much every single day. And we'd talk shop in the clubhouse. And specifically, I remember I think it was 2001, maybe. I mean, I'm having a really good year. And I was just absolutely mashing fastballs. Like I don't know if I've ever gone through a stretch this long of hitting the ball hard every single night. Like even my outs were like, I was just making solid contact every single night. And he came down to me one night, and this is, I don't know, it's been going on for months, and I'm just crushing the ball. And he looks at me and he goes, when are these guys going to stop throwing you a first pitch fastball for a strike? He goes, I say it almost every night. They're not listening to me because they keep doing it and you just keep destroying the baseball. I'm like, Jim, don't mess up a good thing now. Just stop talking about it on the air. And, it was a 3-month stretch where I don't think I've ever been as locked in 3 months as that stretch there. What
makes that happen for you? Is it just beyond our comprehension? It's something.
Baseball is such a mental game, but hitting is you're a better hitter when you have a lack of thought at the plate. So I tell the guys that all the time. They're like, "Huh?" I'm like, "Yeah." You can be cerebral in your workouts and your drills and your extra work and all this stuff. But when you step in the box and your routine in the on deck circle and your routine walking up to the plate and listen to your walk-up song and you tap, and, do all your stuff. But when you get ready to see that pitch, your mind should be clear. There should be no thought unless, I have a plan that I'm going to attack the first pitch that I see, but I was just so thoughtless in that 3-month span. I just saw every pitch so well that it didn't matter what was thrown up there. If it was a strike, I was going to hit it hard.
How many innings do you think Jim Palmer threw in his career?
Oh man, he was way up there. We're talking about back in the day when, Jim Palmer would start probably, 32 starts nowadays is a full slate for a pitcher. He might've started 40 games in a year.
He did. He went 40 starts in 76 with 23 complete games.
23 complete games. You could probably combine every complete game in the last few years in the major leagues. It wouldn't be 23. And he did
absolutely
solo in 1 year. And I would guarantee you he's thrown over 300 innings multiple times.
Yep. 3,948 innings. And I think maybe the most jaw-dropping figure for me, 1975, 10 shutouts.
That's insane.
10 shutouts. Because you could say what you want about like, oh, they would just let them go longer in terms of like going complete game, even when they weren't pitching incredibly. 10 shutouts. You haven't even had that many complete games in the last 2 years, I don't think. So, I mean, that is insane. But yeah, love the Jim Palmer reminder.
Good golfer too, man. He used to play my golf tournament all the time too. Really good golfer.
Good golfer.
Yeah, just a great guy. Just a good guy.
Well, that's one that Jim Palmer will be on my mind for a little bit. He came up when he was 19, played till he was 38. So literally doubled his age.
What was his career record? He won over 300 games, right?
268. But you got probably somewhere to go. I know you got 2 days now or 1 day when people are listening to this till college baseball season. FIU starts up. I'm looking forward to tuning in. Do you guys have a stream? Am I able to stream those games?
I don't even know. I don't know if we do. I've got to find out.
Well, if you need a broadcaster, I know a guy when I'm in town.
Yeah.
I miss it. So we could talk about that, but definitely if you're in the Miami area, go check out FIU. They're going to host Michigan soon. They've got a series coming up, and I'm excited to follow along. Jeff, good luck with the first series, and we'll be talking through the season. Really excited to just be picking your brain in your first full year as a college baseball coach.
Can't wait. I'm really looking forward to it. And, I don't know what to expect or what to kind of compare it to, but our team, I like our components. And I think we have a chance to kind of right the ship, so to speak. We haven't had a winning record in a little while here at FIU, and I think this is the team to do it.
I'm really excited to see it. When you say that, I believe it. So best of luck, and we'll talk again soon.
All right, brother.